की सदा या हुसैन, सबका हो मरहबा या हुसैन, मेरे दिल की।
Shia religious practice has for centuries been widely associated with the act of mourning. Its image in the mainstream is often linked with mourning rituals during the Islamic month of Muharram. Commemorations in remembrance of the martyrdom of the grandson of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Hussein, son of Ali, peace be upon them, have long been a distinct feature of Shia religious practice. These acts of mourning can be traced back to as early as the era of the prophets, including the Prophet Mohammed, peace be upon him, himself. Where exactly has mourning been referred to within the Quran and the early Islamic sources? Who initiated mourning rituals in commemoration of Hussein, and in what historical context? And what are the spiritual, social, and psychological benefits of mourning, according to scholars and academics? This documentary delves into the philosophy of mourning, particularly for the tragedies that befell the household of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as well as its impact on our souls and psychology.
It's been said that grief is the inner experience of loss or pain or difficulty, and mourning is the outer expression of it, whether it be personal and individual or a communal sort of expression or ceremony. The English word mourning actually comes from an Old English word meaning to feel grief or discomfort. And it makes sense that it would come from an Old English word, since things which are fundamental to the human experience in the English language do tend to come from the older language and not be import words.
The word mourning in Arabic, we use a number of terms that have appeared in the Islamic sources. Jaza, for example, and mourning can be crying, weeping, also when you revel the sadness or grief, lamentation for someone, that is called mourning. And you can see that appear in the Holy Quran and Ahadith, and also the Islamic history, Islamic sources, and the practice of AhlulBayt alayhim as-salam.
Sometimes mourning can be a statement. If a loved one has passed away and you want to preserve the legacy of that loved one, mourning can serve as that catalyst to bring forth that legacy.
In the Islamic tradition, sometimes we use the word Reza, which, as most of us probably know, means to offer comfort through condolences and sharing one's difficulty.
Sometimes mourning can also be a statement against injustice. If someone was unjustly killed, fighting for justice, when you mourn that person, you are actually rejecting injustice. You're upholding justice. Mourning serves many purposes. At the core of it is grief.
Psychological benefits of grieving are ample. Modern psychology often points towards dealing with loss in healthy ways, and it suggests that the grieving process is an integral part of it. How is mourning beneficial for our mental health and well-being? According to modern psychology, crying on a regular basis can prove to be beneficial for one's mental health. Japanese academic Haider says that the act of crying is more effective in reducing one's stress levels than laughing or sleeping. Listening to emotive music, watching sad films, and reading tear-jerking books can offer a stress-free effect for the mind.
You have to relieve your stress, and the stress is relieved through crying. And also when you hear about the problems of others, you understand that I am not going through as tough a time that others have also been through. Because many times, you think I'm going through the most difficult time. But when you hear about the others, then you build patience.
Today, when people lose a loved one, behavioral experts have said, don't tell them don't cry, because people often say, don't cry. But no, crying is good because it is an important step in the healing, in the kind of process of moving on to a certain extent, the acceptance of what has happened and part of reality. Closure, it's key.
Some people do struggle if they don't have a way to express their loss or, again, to find meaning out of it. And sometimes this happens in my experience with some Muslims who are bracketed into only mourn for 3 days, or everything is in the hands of Allah, so it's somehow unreligious to express sadness. Or also in places where it's taboo for women to go to the graveyard. I'm not saying every woman has a problem with that, but I have known women who lacked closure because they weren't able to go to the graves of relatives that they had lost. So I think in these regards, it does seem that there is a psychological need for something, and the various rituals and customs we have as human beings provide templates to be able to do that, and they also provide a safe space to be able to express these feelings.
You learn how to develop patience through Karbala and Ashura and through mourning, and psychologically that helps. And number 4, according to modern psychology, when you share the grief of others, especially AhlulBayt ﷺ, because sharing releases stress and your tension, your depression, and when you share happiness, it increases, and that helps. Mourning would help psychologically.
The act of mourning and expression of grief has been mentioned on several occasions within the Holy Quran. What is worth noting is that on each occasion, mourning has not been condemned or rejected by Allah. Where in the Quran has mourning been mentioned, and in what context has it been related?
When the days of Muharram and Ashura come, and you find millions of the followers of the AhlulBayt, peace be upon them, around the globe mourning the tragic martyrdom of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, many people wonder, they ask, is there any basis for the act of mourning in the Holy Quran? Indeed, the act of mourning is well established in the Holy Quran. One example is Surah Al-Buruj, when it discusses the tragic event of Ashab al-Ukhdud, the people of the pit, or the people of the ditch, as the Holy Quran refers to them. They were a group of believers, Christian believers, who were mercilessly killed. They were burned by the unjust tyrant of their time, an unjust king. See how the Holy Quran depicts and portrays this incident for us. قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ النَّارِ ذَاتِ الْوَقُودِ. The people of the pit have been killed. The flames of fire were lit because they believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see how the Holy Quran dramatically portrays this incident for us? What is the aim of these verses in Surah Al-Buruj? It's to elicit our emotions. So we mourn what happened to them. We reject the injustice that happened to them. Otherwise, it's an incident that happened in history, and that's it, it passed. Why does the Holy Quran depict this incident in such an emotional way?
Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam, who very clearly says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes him in Surah Yusuf, Surah number 12, verse number 84. قال يا أسف على يوسف وابيضت عيناه من الحزن وهو كظيم. And he used to say, Ya asaf ala Yusufa, meaning he used to long for his son Yusuf and cry. So much so that وَبِيَضَّتَ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ, that he lost his sight from grief. So he would cry so much that we don't cry as much. We only cry to the extent that we have tears. He cried to an extent where he lost his sight, which is a major loss. وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ, so he was controlling his grief, and even then he lost his sight. And you can see other sources where mourning or where lamentation have appeared. In Surah Dhariyat, for example, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam with his wife is standing, and and Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam comes with other angels. So even if you look in the Holy Quran does not mention the names of the angels, it only says the angels. But in the traditions, it says that there were 4 angels who came, and 3 or 4 angels, and they gave the good news of a son to Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, and imra'atuhu, in Surah Zariyat it says that his wife was standing there. فَسَكَّتْ وَجْهَا, she slapped her face, and that أَلِدُ وَأَنَا أَجُوزُ, will I now give birth in old age? So you can see that even lamentation, even beating the face has appeared in the Holy Quran. Crying has appeared, and Allah does not condemn the crying of Hazrat Yaqub, Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam, or condemn the slapping of the face of Sarah, salamun alayha, who was the wife of a messenger, the mother of a messenger, sister of a messenger, because there are traditions to indicate that she was a sister of Nabi Lut alayhi salam, and she is the wife of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam and the mother of Nabi Ishaq. وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ تَرَى أَعْيُنَهُمْ تَفِيضُ مِنَ الدَّمْعِ. The Holy Quran says that when they hear what has been revealed unto the messenger, their eyes are full of tears. So mourning has appeared in the Holy Quran in many places, and Allah has praised it and not denounced it.
The books of Hadith are replete with instances in which the Holy Prophet and his family practiced acts of mourning to grieve the loss of their loved ones. The passing of his uncle Hamza, the death of his son Ibrahim, and the loss of his cousin Ja'far are but a few. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, also names the year in which his uncle Abu Talib and wife Khadija died as the year of grief, demonstrating his deep devotion to these individuals and his sense of grief over their demise. To what extent has mourning for the deceased been encouraged according to both Shia and Sunni traditions, as practiced by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him? Or is weeping over the dead an innovation as suggested by a small minority of traditions within the Sunni school?
The topic of mourning is much more elaborately discussed in Hadith, and we have basically a couple groups of Hadith. Within the Sunni Hadith books, we do see 2 genres of Hadith, if you will. One which is restrictive of mourning, or maybe casts a questionable eye on it, and the other which does condone it. And the fact that there is this group of Hadith in the Sunni tradition does mean that sometimes there are differences in viewpoints between Sunnis and Shi'is about mourning and everyday loss. Like our own personal losses, or also commemorations surrounding Ashura. That being said, many Sunnis don't take these Hadith literally and do still have mourning customs that are similar to Shi'is. I think in general, in most of the Islamic world, there does tend to be a lot of expression of grief when it happens, as opposed to some countries where these things are sometimes kept a bit more inward.